everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ashley and today I'm going to be talking about my top 10 most surprising books of 2021. If you've been keeping up with my channel, you'll have noticed I'm putting out a lot of these videos in December where I'm wrapping up my reading year in different ways, like the best and the worst and the most surprising and the most disappointing. So if you haven't seen the ones that I've posted already, I'll link them down in the description below so you can check them out on my channel. And if you want to make sure you don't miss any of the other ones I'm posting, make sure you are clicking that subscribe button and the post notification bell so you can know when I'm posting these new videos. But today we're going to be talking about the books that really wowed me this year, the books that came up out of nowhere and surprised me. Some of these may be included in my best books of the year list that is yet to come out, but they don't all necessarily have to be the best books that I read this year. They're just books that I really didn't have expectations for, or I was expecting them to just not be as good as they were, or they had some kind of surprising element to them that I really enjoyed. And so I just thought it would be a fun way to recap some of my reading year, to talk about some of the big surprises that I had over the year. I'm also going to work through this list of books in the order of rating, so I'm going to go from the lower rated ones to the highest rated ones, because the higher rated they are, typically the more surprising it was that I love them so much. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump on into the books. The first book that I have to talk about is This Is How You Lose the Time War. This is a sci-fi romance type story that I've heard a lot of people praise over the years, but I didn't necessarily know if it was going to be something I enjoyed, especially because so many people say it's difficult to understand, that they don't know what they were reading, they don't know what happened, they had to read chapters more than once, that it was just confusing. And then over time I would start to hear more negative reviews of the book because people seem to be so confused by it. And sometimes with books that are like really flowery language, it just doesn't hit the mark for me. But I was pleasantly surprised with how much I enjoyed this one. It was a really beautiful love story in the end. It's a very difficult book to comprehend and to explain, so I'm probably not going to do a great job of it. But there are these two people who are both fighting on like these different sides of war, basically, and one is red and one is blue. That's what they are called. They're like secret agents of some sort, and they are talking to each other through time and through different objects. So they can leave messages to each other in like a bottle that the other drinks, and then they get like the love letter from the other one. But it's like a very tense type of relationship because obviously they're supposed to be pitted against one another, but throughout the book they reflect more on that experience and what it means to be in something like that and how you form your own beliefs and fit in with a system like that. And then they just have a little like sweet love and appreciation for each other, and it's a really beautiful book. I ended up giving it about 3 stars because I didn't fully understand it. I don't know if anyone really fully does, but it is very beautiful. I would love to reread it again someday, and it was a really great surprise. The next book on my list is a contemporary fiction novel that was marketed as a romance quite a bit, and so then a lot of people started to be disappointed by it because they said it wasn't really a romance, and I was just hearing a lot of differing opinions about it, so I was quite surprised when I loved it as much as I did, and that is Honey Girl. This is a story about this woman who is in her 20s and she is finishing a PhD program. She is a woman of color in STEM, and she is facing a lot of challenges and discrimination that come along with that, and she is also just kind of having a quarter life crisis with everything surrounding that as she is phasing out of the academic world and into the real world. And the book begins when she has gone off to Vegas and accidentally drunkenly married a stranger, and the story follows what happens after that. So it sounds like it's this really crazy whirlwind romance where you're gonna follow their relationship so much and it's gonna be so awkward and uncomfortable because now they're married and how are they gonna navigate a marriage? But it's not like that at all. It's a very quiet book. It is very much an existential book. It is very much just a quiet contemporary, and I was so surprised at how much I love this story, especially because I don't always love books about just women in their 20s trying to figure it all out, but this one just really resonated with me. It was really beautifully written. It was really poetic at times, especially when she is describing the other woman that this woman married. So it's a sapphic romance. I don't know if I said that already, but I just love the way she talked about her. I loved the way she starts to question everything about the way she's lived her life so far and how she wants to continue living it. It's just a very relatable book, and it was very beautiful. And I'm probably gonna say this every time, but I was just very surprised by it. The next book is so surprising to me because it is so far outside my comfort zone. This book takes place in space, and when have I ever liked a book about space? Honestly, I don't think I've ever liked a book that was set in space, but this one I actually had a pretty good time with, and that is Winter's Orbit. I think the reason I like this so much is because it's basically red, white, and royal blue in space. It's about these two guys. They're both some sort of royalty or part of some different governments in this whole space world, and they end up getting put together in a marriage. I think in an attempt to do some like PR cleanup move. There's like something going on. The governments need to align in some way, and so they get put together in this marriage. They're both very unhappy about it, but then over the course of the story, they end up falling in love, and it was such a cute story. I had so much fun with it. I really loved the banter between the characters. I really liked just the characters in general and getting to know them more. There's a bit of a mystery infused in the story as well, which I always enjoy a good mystery. The romance was cute, and I just had a really good time with it. So honestly, it might be one of the biggest surprises of 2021 that I ended up enjoying a book that was set in space. The next book is one that surprised me because it just kind of slipped in my radar, like out of nowhere. I really don't hear many people talk about this, and I also just didn't read as many graphic novels this year as I did in 2020, but this one I really enjoyed, and it really surprised me because I just don't hear people talking about this one, and that is The Girl from the Sea. This is a coming of age story that follows this teenage girl who lives on this island, and she is very much a teenage girl who is just experiencing teenage girl problems of just wanting to fit in but not feeling like you know how, not feeling like you know who you are, how to be yourself, feeling like you can't be yourself. And she ends up encountering this girl who comes from the sea, and they have a little summer romance together, but she's embarrassed of her too, and so then she's like tackling that in the relationship. But it was such a cute graphic novel. I loved the story. I loved the little romance. It was very much relatable with just being a teenage girl. And most of all, I absolutely adored the art style of this one. I really like graphic novels that are set at the sea, like just ocean, island graphic novels anyway. I think those tend to be pretty visually appealing. But this one, oh my god, it was so beautiful. And even like the clothing on the characters was so beautiful. When I read this one, I was like, this wins the award for best dressed characters in a graphic novel like ever. I loved it so much. I also read this one as an ebook through my library, and so I was able to read it on my iPad, and I feel like looking at the images digitally enhanced them even more and made them even more beautiful. So I'm really glad I read it that way, but I do still want to pick up a physical copy because I want to be able to just like flip through it again because it was such a cute graphic novel, and it would be really good for the summertime. But yeah, I can't believe I don't hear more people talking about this one. It's really cute. So if you haven't heard of it yet and you like graphic novels, I would definitely recommend picking this one up. The next book is a classic that I read this year, and I don't always love classics. This one I had suspicions that I might love it because I know a lot of people really like this one. I know people in my personal life who really like this one, and it is a horror classic, and I really love some horror. So I decided to check it out this year, and I was pleasantly surprised, and that is Dracula. I have an entire reading vlog dedicated to my experience reading this book for the first time, so definitely go check that out if you missed that this year. But this one was just really surprising. I know I'm saying surprising a lot, but that's the whole point of the video. But it really was just super surprising to me how accessible it was, how engaged I was with the story, because that's typically the biggest issue I have with classics is the writing style just feels different because it's from a different time, it's older, it's usually more dense, and it's just more difficult for me to get into. But this one I didn't really have trouble getting into it, and I really enjoyed it. I was really engaged the whole time. There were some super creepy moments that have stuck with me ever since reading that book. So this is a classic that I highly recommend checking out if you haven't yet. It is a little bit long, but I definitely think it's worth the read. The next book on my list is one that surprised me because it is so far outside of what I was reading before I read this, and then this book really shaped a lot of my reading throughout the rest of the year, and that is A Court of Thorns and Roses. This is one of the most highly hyped fantasy books like ever, but I did not think there was any way in this world that I was going to enjoy a fairy romance fantasy book. I was quite wrong. I became a sucker for this book and this series this year, and it really got me into exploring more fantasy books in general this year. I ended up signing up for an Illumicrate subscription, and now I get Illumicrate fantasy books, and I'm just a lot more more open-minded to trying more fantasy books, and I really think A Court of Thorns and Roses was a big part of kicking that off, because I was like, okay, so if I can like a fairy romance set in a fantasy land that is based off of Beauty and the Beast retelling, there's probably a lot out there in the fantasy genre I could be enjoying if this is what I am liking. So I'm really glad that I ended up trying it out this year. I actually filmed a reading vlog reading this book for the first time as well, so you can go check that out if you missed that one too. But yeah, this was just like a wild card. Did not expect to like this, and then had so much fun with it that I kept reading all the rest of the books in the series. So maybe if you've been skeptical about this one for a while, it might be worth just giving a try, because you never know. The next book on my list is one that surprised me, because it did surprise me with the plot twist at the ending, but it also just surprised me that I enjoyed it so much because it is an older backlist book that came back on the radar this year because a Netflix show was made adapted from the book. And I don't know, I just didn't think I was gonna like it as much as I did, but I ended up giving it 5 stars. It absolutely blew me away, and that is Behind Her Eyes. This is a thriller book that is basically just set up like your average domestic thriller, where there is this woman who ends up having this great evening with this man. She goes into work the next day. It turns out he's her new boss, and he is also married. And so she's immediately put in a super weird situation, and then she ends up getting really ingrained in their marriage. She becomes friends with the wife, gets really obsessed with what's going on in the marriage. And it just sounded like it was going to be your average domestic thriller that I would typically just slap a 3-star on and move on. But this one has such a unique plot twist to it. If you haven't read this yet or watched the show, I would highly recommend doing one or both of those things, because it is just such a unique thriller, and I really think it's worth checking out. I will say the show follows the book very closely. I think the show is a great adaptation, and the most exciting thing about the story is probably the plot twist. So whichever way you typically like to consume is the one I would recommend doing first, because that's going to be the big exciting moment for you, is the plot twist. I read the book first and then watched the show. I would probably recommend doing it that way, because I still really enjoyed watching the show, especially knowing the plot twist. I liked watching the way they inserted hints about the plot twist in a visual medium. That was really interesting to see. So definitely recommend this one. Thought it was a lot of fun. The next book is one that I read for my in-person book club this year, and I had never heard of this book before. I honestly was like, this isn't gonna be very good, but they wanted to read it, so I'll read it, I'll check it out, I'll see what it's about. And I really, really liked this book a lot. I gave it 4 stars at the time. After thinking about it more, it's a 5-star. I don't really have any complaints with it. And it's especially surprising that I loved it so much because it is a YA book. But that is The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein. I haven't read the original Frankenstein, so I don't have all the details, but this is basically inspired from Frankenstein, but it's following Elizabeth's perspective, and it's not a perfect one-to-one of what happens in Frankenstein. There's like some twists and some creative things that she did with the story. But I honestly was just so surprised how much I enjoyed this one. I love the way it was written. I love the atmosphere. It's a very morose, somber book following how Elizabeth grew up with Victor and how his strangeness started to come out, and how she kind of enabled him in his monstrous ways, and her exploring that and just trying to figure out how she can love and support him and what the right decisions are to be made, and just realizing more about how monstrous he is. This one really reminded me of A Dowry of Blood, which is a book that follows Dracula's bride's perspective and just really talks about being in an abusive relationship with an uneven power dynamic. So this one really reminded me of that. So if you really love Dowry of Blood, I also recommend checking this one out. I did like this one more than A Dowry of Blood. A Dowry of Blood was like a solid 4-star for me, and this was a solid 5-star. So if you're like me and this had somehow never come upon your radar and you'd never heard of it, I would definitely recommend picking it up. The next book is one that surprised me because everyone hated it and I loved it, and it's an author that I haven't loved in the past, and that is Every Value Break by Peter Swanson. I don't know whether or not this is going to end up in my best books of the year list or not. I haven't made that list yet, so I honestly just genuinely have no idea. But at the time of reading it, I was like, wow, this is one of the best thrillers I've read this year. I had so much fun with it. I read it all in a day. I listened to it on the audiobook. I couldn't put it down. It was in some reading vlog that I did, so if I remember, I'll try to link that above so you can check that one out if you want as well. But I just had so much fun with this. And then after reading it and loving it so much, I did check out more reviews because I was like, why is everyone hating this? I don't know. And I totally agree with what everyone is saying about it. In the critiques, like, I see why people don't like it, but it was just fun for me. So if you just want a fun, fast-paced kind of cheesy thriller, I would definitely recommend this one. It's about this woman who is getting married to this guy, and she's not like fully convinced on if she really wants to be with him, but like it makes sense on paper, so she's going with it. But when she's on her bachelorette trip, she ends up having a one-night stand with just a stranger, just a strange man she meets. But she decides to forget about it and move on. She does want to marry this guy, but then once they get married and they go on their honeymoon, that guy shows back up and he is like convinced he's in love with her and they're meant to be. And so then that causes complications for her. She has to figure out like what to do about him and how to keep that hidden from her new husband. And it is just very fast-paced, very full of action, very much not knowing who you can trust. It just had me like flipping my mind back and forth the whole time, and I just had a lot of fun with it. I didn't take it too seriously, just read it all in a day. I think the audiobook experience was really conducive for that too, for me to not be like slowly reading the book and overanalyzing and trying to figure things out. I was just like letting someone read it to me and having a good time while I was doing some chores around the house and stuff. And it was just such a great surprise because I really have not liked Peter Swanson stuff in the past, but this one just happened to really work for me. So I'm very interested to keep reading more from Peter Swanson and see if this was an anomaly or if I all of a sudden I'm gonna like his stuff. I don't know. But that was definitely a wild card of the year. And then the last book on my list is one that is for sure gonna be on my best books of the year list. This is one of my favorite books of all time, and that is Migrations by Charlotte McConaughey. I adore this book. I know I'm gonna be talking about this book in my best books of the year list, so I won't spend too much time on it, but it just really blew me away. I had heard no one talk about this book. It had just kind of ended up on my shelves somehow. It had sat on my shelves for many months, probably at least like 6 to 8 months. I don't remember why I picked it up or why I bought it. It was just something that was sitting there, and then I read it and I was like, was this book written for me? Like, it just felt like it was written just for me, and it was so special to read that book for the first time. I love that book so much. It is so special to me, and it's just such a cool experience when you don't hear anyone talk about a book and then you discover it and you have such a great experience with it. It really stays with you, and that is a book that will just stay with me forever. I just know it will. I love it so much. I just want to reread it a million times. It is the perfect book for me, and if you somehow have not read that yet, even though I talk about it all the time, put it on your list. Go read it. It's a beautiful book. You will not regret it. So that is it for my list of the most surprising books that I read this year. Let me know if we have any of these books in common down in the comments below, or if not, let me know what books surprised you the most this year, which ones just kind of came up out of nowhere and blew you away, or the ones that you didn't think you would like, but then you ended up loving them. I just love getting a good surprise from a book every now and again. It really just reignites my love for reading and gives me hope that no matter how much I read, I will always be able to pick up a book and really be blown away by it. It's just such a special feeling. That just feels so good. Like I said, I'm going to be doing a lot more of these videos, so definitely make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of them. And you can check out the links in my description down below to go see the ones I've posted so far. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on my next video. Bye!